The governor has introduced a spending plan, $252 billion, most ever. And as the ranker of the Assembly's Ways and Means Committee, why don't you bring the folks up to date, up to speed on where we are in this process?
Sure. So 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, really, we finished the budget hearing process. We had 14 hearings on different topics related to the budget. It's now the week where the majorities will put out their one house budget, which is essentially their wish list. They'll reject some of the proposals the governor has put forth. They'll accept some of them. They'll put in some of their own initiatives, and kind of that'll draw the battle lines for the final negotiations as we get towards late March. The governor's budget, as you mentioned, $252 billion, a lot of initiatives, a lot of things that are popular as it would be if you're spending $252 billion. But it's continued growth of spending that we've been raising alarms about for the last several years. The out years do not look pretty right now. Our tax receipts have been strong, and it's enabling this spending, but at some point, we need to align our recurring revenue and our recurring spending, because right now we're looking at out year, when we look 3 years into the future, of about $27 billion in deficits. So that's something that we need to keep in mind as we come to a final budget agreement.
Do you see the majority rejecting any of the governor's proposals? Any?
Well, I think unfortunately the ones they're probably most likely to reject are probably some of the tax rebates, tax cuts. There is this proposal for these rebate checks that cost about $3 billion. There has been some talk on the Democratic side that they'd like to do something different with that money. Regardless of where that goes, I would caution my colleagues that have come out and said, hey, we should spend it on this tax credit or this other thing that is a recurring issue. This is kind of being sold as a windfall the state got because of inflation with sales tax. So it's not recurring revenue. So you can't commit yourself to some new spending that is going to be recurring year after year.
How about returning it to the people who put it there in the first place? Is that ever come up as a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, the governor has this proposal for this rebate check, which is fine. We're never going to say no to putting money back in people's pockets. We had talked about this as inflation had gone up, as that was going on, just removing the sales tax on certain, everyday household items, personal care items that people were purchasing, because sales tax being a percentage, as these goods were getting more expensive, the state was reaping a bit of a windfall. So we would have preferred the state just not collect it to begin with during that time, but the next best thing is giving it back to the taxpayers.
Two of the biggest cost drivers every budget cycle, it seems, are education funding and Medicaid funding. Is that the case this year?
Yeah, on the Medicaid side, there's, but really, again, issues going into the future. We've gotten kind of back to where we were, 15 years ago in terms of the growth being a double-digit number in Medicaid. So that is something that we really need to be cautious about. What the governor did in this executive budget is shifted some of the spending that is born in Medicaid to other agencies like OPWDD, and that's really how they're playing around with being under the Medicaid global cap. Education, it's very different than last year. We had this Foundation Aid study in the fall. Some of the recommendations, just in terms of updating some of the data, are being utilized. But we're seeing a minimum increase of at least 2% to every district. So it does increase education spending by a decent number. And as if history tells you anything, it's that that number will get higher as we get towards a final budget.
You see any flies in the ointment? Every year it's one or two issues, whether it's prison reform, maybe this year the HALT Act. Any such items going to hold things up, you think?
Yeah, you know what? It looked like as we were going into this prior to the last few weeks with this prison situation, but the involuntary confinement issue the governor had put forth really in the aftermath of that horrific situation we saw in the subway in New York City where that individual lit somebody on fire. So that was one that from a policy perspective there might be some difference of opinion on. And yeah, over the last few weeks, we've obviously been talking about, as we have been talking about since HALT passed, the dangers of that legislation and it making our prisons less safe. And obviously the correction officers of this state have kind of had enough. And they've demonstrated that with this walkout they've had for the last several weeks. So I think some of those issues will be on the table. It really runs the gamut. I mean, there are those on the Democratic side that want to pass legislation that'll kind of empty more prisoners out of our prisons.
Wow.
Those of us on our side would like to kind of pull back on some of what we've done that we think have made it less safe for both the correction officers and the inmates.